Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about the Canon M50. So this is the Canon M50 right here, and I've been using this camera as my main camera on this YouTube channel since the end of August. And in the time that I'm using this camera, I've really gotten to grips with a lot of the functionality this camera has. So I do think that this camera has been a really big step up from my old Canon G7X, which incidentally is what I'm filming this video on today. I found that there's a lot of things that I really like about the camera, and there's a couple of things that I don't like so much about the camera. So that's what I want to talk about today, and I'm going to start with the things that I like. So the first thing to say about the Canon M50 is it's a really good camera for beginners. It's really easy to customize a lot of the controls and functions on the camera. Also, if you're inexperienced with cameras and you're not really used to using cameras, there's a basic menu layout on it which kind of holds your hand a lot when you're going through the menus, and it explains what all of the settings are and how they work with the camera. So that's really great for anyone if you're like starting out in photography or videography. It's a really useful tool to have. But equally, if you are a bit more experienced with using cameras, you can switch that menu off and you can just have it as the standard Canon menu that you would get on a lot of the more traditional Canon DSLR cameras like the 80D and that kind of thing. Also, what I really like about the Canon M50 is that it's a much more dynamic camera than a point and shoot camera like the Canon G7X that I used to use. When I got this camera, I got it with the kit lens, which was the 15 to 45mm kit lens, and I've since upgraded that to the Canon 10 to 18 EFS lens. And in order to mount that lens onto the camera, I did need to get a separate mount, which I got the official Canon EFS to M mount lens adapter. And what that lens adapter does is it just allows me to mount any standard Canon EF or EF lens onto the camera. And the reason that I went for the 10 to 18mm EFS lens is just it's a much better lens for vlogging than the 15 to 45mm kit lens that I got with the camera. It's a much better lens in terms of stability, and it gives you that wider focal length, which is also much better for vlogging, which is what I do most of the time with the camera. And the other big advantage for me in buying the lens adapter is that I then can borrow Elaine's lenses, because she uses the Canon 80D, which takes the EFS lenses as standard. So it means that we can actually swap lenses and borrow each other's lenses if we need to when we're making videos. And then the main reason that I actually wanted to upgrade my camera to this camera is that it has a 3.5mm jack mic input on the side here. So what that means is I can mount a microphone to the top of the camera, and just once I'm using this microphone, I get much better audio quality. Because what I noticed with my old camera is when I was outdoors, I would get hit quite badly with wind noise and background noise, whereas with this, that's not an issue. Once you're talking into the microphone, it picks you up really clearly, and it does a really good job at blocking out wind noise and additional background noises. So that was kind of the main reason why I wanted to upgrade to this camera. Another thing that I absolutely love about this camera is the fact that it has dual pixel autofocus. Now, the dual pixel autofocus from Canon is, I think, one of the best autofocus systems on the market right now. It is really fast, and the camera just focuses on its subject so quickly. I was a bit worried when I changed from the kit lens to the lens setup that I have now that using the adapter it might slow down the autofocus a little bit, but it actually hasn't. There's been no change in the speed of the autofocus, whether it uses the lens on the adapter or whether it uses a lens mounted straight onto the camera. The camera doesn't seem to really know the difference, and it focuses really fast. It is so much quicker than my old camera, and it is just really good, and that just makes vlogging so much easier than it was on my Canon G7X. And then another thing that I really love about this camera is just the size of it. Like, the body on the camera itself is really small, and I just love how it looks. I find actually it's quite comfortable in my hand. It's a nice size, particularly with this lens. It's a good, there's a good bit of weight on the front of it, and it's nicely balanced for me. And then the other thing is that I absolutely love the the look of this camera with this lens, because the lens is much bigger than the camera, and I just think it looks really, really cool with a big lens and a small body. I've always really liked that look in a camera. It has absolutely no bearing on the performance of the camera whatsoever, but I just really enjoy how this camera looks, and I just think it looks great when I'm using it, and that's one of the things that I really like about the camera, and it makes me enjoy when I'm using the camera. And then another thing I like about this camera is the price. It's really, really affordable for all of the specs that it has. For example, at the moment, to buy this camera in a shop in Dublin, it's available with the kit lens exactly the way I bought it, for €630. If you look on Amazon, I think it's available at the moment on the UK store for 599 sterling. So it is a really affordable camera for everything that you get in there. So now it's time to talk about some of the things that I don't really like about this camera. And the first one that I want to talk about is the fact that this camera has a 4K option, but there's a couple of problems with that. One is that the 4K has a really heavy crop factor, which means that effectively when you're using 4K, the camera zooms in. So if I have this set at its widest level, it's much more zoomed in than it would be when I'm shooting in 1080. The other thing that I really don't like about the 4K, and this is actually a much bigger deal than the crop, is that the dual pixel autofocus, which is one of the best things about this camera, is disabled in 4K. And what that means is that the autofocus really doesn't work as well at all. Again, if you're doing something like you're shooting B-roll or you're shooting 4K time lapses, if you use manual focus, then you're gonna get some great footage using the 4K, because the 4K in this camera is really nice and it's really sharp. But the problem is, if you're vlogging in 4K, you don't have the dual pixel autofocus, which means that you would have to, in order to make sure that you're perfectly in focus all the time, you would have to use manual focus. Now, the camera does have focus peaking, which makes manually focusing a lot easier, but it's still not ideal for vlog style videos. For a sit down video like this, you can really work around the 4K limitations in this camera by using manual focus and moving the camera further back. But if you want to be vlogging with this camera, if you're doing it in 4K, it's really not going to do you any favors, and I think it's going to make your life a lot harder. The second thing then that I really sort of don't like about this camera is it has a super slow-mo option. It's capable of filming in 120 frames per second, and when you shoot in 120 frames per second, when you play that back, the camera automatically slows it down and you get this beautiful, buttery smooth, super slow motion footage. But it has one problem: it only does that in 720p, and in 2019 nobody's really uploading videos to YouTube in 720p anymore. Everybody's using 1080 HD or higher. So the fact that you can only shoot 120 frames per second in 720p really kind of makes me question why they bothered to put it in the camera at all, because I really feel that very few people are going to be using that setting in 2019. And now we get on to my biggest criticism about the Canon M50, and that is its low light performance. If you have this set to an automatic profile for filming, it's just terrible in low light. The ISO performance on this camera above 1600 starts to get really, really noisy. So you get really noisy footage, and what that means is the picture quality gets really grainy, and you see that a lot in any of the darker areas of the screen where you can see like dots and pixels kind of moving around. So in order to get any kind of really good or usable footage out of this camera in low light, I have to shoot with all of my shooting settings on manual, which means I'm controlling my shutter speed, my aperture, and my ISO manually, and I'm tweaking those as I go. That's not something that I was ever used to doing before I got this camera, so it's something that I am learning, and I'm learning a lot about how to film as a result of it, which on the whole is a positive thing. But like for vlogging and for just doing things quickly, having automatic settings made life so much easier. But with this camera in any kind of a low light setting, if you set it to automatic, it sets the ISO really, really high, and then the picture quality just looks dreadful in my opinion, which is why I've started to stay away from it. For example, like I said already, Elaine's main camera is the Canon 80D, and I accept that that's a much higher spec camera, and I accept that it's a much more expensive camera, but if you put this camera and the 80D side by side on paper, the spec is very similar between them. What I found is that the 80D is just so much better in low light than this camera here. And then if I just swap this lens from one camera to the other, I can see a noticeable improvement on the 80D when all of the other settings are the same. So yeah, that is just one thing that I think is a little bit disappointing. So those are all of the things that I like and dislike about the Canon M50, and I have to say, on the whole, I think this is a brilliant camera. If you're a vlogger or you're just getting into photography, this is a really great camera to buy. And yes, as I've already outlined, it has its limitations, but then there's no perfect camera out there for everyone. So it really is like, if you're looking to buy a camera, it really is a matter of just going through all of the things that matter to you and all of the things that you need from a camera and buying the one that meets the most of your needs. And for me, that was the Canon M50, and having used it for 4 or 5 months, I'd have to say if I had to go out and buy a new camera tomorrow, it would still be the Canon M50. This just does everything that I need it to do. And yeah, sure, I wish it was as good as the Canon 80D in low light, but on the whole, I'm more than happy with the overall performance of this camera, and I'd absolutely recommend it to somebody who's in the market for a camera at the moment. If you buy this camera and you pair it with the 10-18 EFS lens, a GorillaPod, and a Rode mic, you have, in my opinion, the best vlogging setup for YouTube available at the moment. And that really is, for me, why I think this is just one of the best cameras you can buy right now. So that's all I have to say about the Canon M50 right now. I think it's a little beast of a camera and I think it's great. So I just want to say thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you like it. If you do, please give me a big thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you want to subscribe to me on Instagram and Twitter, I'm trying to do a lot more with those at the moment. So I'll stick a link to my Twitter and Instagram handles in the description below. Thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.